influence wars that are going on right now is absolutely crazy. And the question that you have to start asking yourself is why? Why? Why is this happening? And it all comes down to this whole aspect of what that song is about. It's a silent war. This is about control, controlling your thoughts, controlling your mind, your actions, your influence, controlling who you vote for, what you buy. This is the modern world that this was the modern world that was constructed, and we're at the end of this kind of this this construction of what it used to be. And we're now starting to evolve away from it. But at the same time, you're going to have this exponential increase in the amount of things that try to capture your attention and distract you from the truth and so forth. And I've been really active on these things. And, it's that song right there, question everything, trust no one. I think that is one of the most important things is question everything. Trust no one. Information is absolutely the weapon. And we need to remember the motto of the Red Pill Project. And I will say this every day to you all, if I have to, and to everybody else I go in front of, is never believe anything anybody tells you, no matter who they are, what authority they possess or profess, unless you can prove it through your own research, your own investigation, through your own inquiry, through your own volition and will. And I say that we need to question everything. We need to investigate everything. And I say that because there's certain things that are said on social media. Like even today, I did a generalization in a post and a big account commented on it. We're going to get to that here in a little while. And I'm like, well, hold on. Let me extrapolate what I'm actually trying to say here. And so sometimes when I'm speaking to an X audience, I generalize because they already know what I'm talking about. They already can kind of pinpoint what I'm saying. But when you're going to a broader audience, like on X, you sometimes have to clarify what you're saying and stuff like that. And I understand that. And that's what I did with this post. And we're actually going to get into that because it's important to talk about today. But, there's changing technology that's occurring right now, and it's rapid and it's exponential, and it's going to increase over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. This weekend we were on a live Q&A. So I did a show Saturday night, and then we did the live Q&A after the show. And I was in the live Q&A. And if anybody remembers that conversation, we were talking about flock cameras. And I said that, hey, look, I've had experience with this stuff, and I started talking about some things. I'm not going to share all of the details of what we were talking about. You got to join those live Q&As. But there's some just personal private information in there I don't want to share out there. But I had experience with some of this stuff, and I went out there and I said, look, everything that you do from your webcam, your computer, your TV, your monitors, inside your vehicle, your phone, they already watch and track everything that you do and say. Like saying that, oh my God, flock cameras are the worst. Yeah, we have to pinpoint this down, and we have to get certain policies, rules, and regulations in place to ensure that our constitutional rights are protected, as well as that there's a digital Bill of Rights infrastructure in place that protects us within the digital landscape. Absolutely, I'm absolutely a proponent of that. But we're beating a dead horse on the sense that, like, oh my God, they're surveilling us. Yeah, they continuously always surveil us. If it's not flock cameras, it's the pings that your cell phone utilizes, contact tracing that your cell phone utilizes. It's Ring and all these other cameras that are integrated throughout the entire United States and throughout the entire world that track your every movement. The NSA is tracking every damn thing that you've ever said, all your web history, whether it's in private or not, or even through a Tor browser. They're capturing all of that data, and they know it on everybody. It's already been done. And I thought it was interesting that I was talking about this Saturday night, and then I saw this post from Mario, and I said, hey, did anybody remember what we were talking about the other night on the live Q&A? And I posted this on my X. But I'll pull this up real quick because I find it really interesting that we were just talking about it the other day. And then today, it tends to show up in my post preview. Palantir's latest system is designed to fuse satellites, radar, cameras, and other sensors into a single real-time picture of people and movement. No shit. The obvious question is what happens when that architecture meets something like Flock's enormous network of automated license plate cameras. It already has, Mario. Come on, stop being stupid. This is quite literally what I was talking about the other day. And if people know that conversation in my live Q&A, this isn't new. This has been around for well over this integration right here has been around for well over 8 to 10 years, and it gets even worse when you realize what they can do with all of that. It's not just capturing the data and the information and the video. It's about taking the metadata analysis. It's about going out there and cross correlating cell phone ping data, geolocation, geofencing data, correlating your login IP address and cell phone tower information to your location, about going out there and watching a history of X posts or social media posts and integrating that into a wider, broader spectrum of what they can actually tell in the context of predictive analytical software, knowing what's going to happen over the next week, the next 3 weeks, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, and how to dictate and understand that. All of these node points just add into that whole infrastructure that we've been talking about for a long time already. And so you're like, well, what do we do about it? Well, we have to ensure. You can't fight it. The technology is coming. You can't fight it. I mean, you can fight the flock cameras. I know that, right? But what I'm trying to say here is that we have to use that fourth branch of government, our voice. We have to use our minds, our ideas. We have to go out there. We have to change policy and regulation. We have to ensure that capitalism survives by going out there and telling these corporations and companies, we're not going to buy your products if you're going to put very fine print on the terms of service that you're going to be spying on us, and I'm just not going to utilize this. This conversation Saturday night started with people talking about how there's vehicles that are coming out now that have these various different cameras that track your eye movements and your movements to see if you're drunk or impaired or sleepy, and they'll even shut down the vehicle. And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, this isn't new. Your TV, if you have a modern TV, LED, big screen TV, whatever these things are in your house, it does the same thing. It's listening to you. Why do you think when you're sitting there talking about, man, I need to go get some eggs at the grocery store, 3 minutes later on Amazon, you have egg commercials popping up. You go to your social media feed on Facebook, you got egg commercials. They're listening to everything that you're saying already, and you've accepted it blindly by going in there and just not reading the endless 37 pages of terms of services. But what we have to do is we have to promote legislation in Congress to ensure that our Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, First Amendment rights are protected and guaranteed, and that we shouldn't have to go through endless pages of terms of service to go out there to protect our Fourth Amendment rights. Makes sense? So this is what I'm trying to say, is that this shit is very, very real, and it's going to come very, very fast. And we as a people, as Americans, we need to stand up and step up right now and get our congressmen, get our senators to produce legislation to protect our interests within everything that's happening right now. I mean, because honestly, that's like one of the biggest solutions that I can find, because we're not going to fight the technology when the technology becomes superior to us, because that's where it's headed. That's what this big silent war is all about. The silent war is who can obtain artificial superintelligence first, who can obtain an intelligence that was man-created, man-made, that is far superior in its thinking capabilities and its strategic and tactical capabilities than a human being. And that is a very fucking scary precedent that is being set. But guess what? The predicament that comes about from that war is this: if we don't do it, somebody else will. If we don't do it, Iran will do it. The UK will do it. China will do it. There's a show out there called Silo on Apple TV. If you haven't watched it, I don't want to ruin too much of it for you. But it takes place in the future, and people in a post-apocalyptic world, they live in these silos underground built by this trillionaire. And the reason they built the silos is because the trillionaire created a technology, an artificial intelligence that basically maps itself through nanotechnology. And this nanotechnology was exploited and weaponized by Iran, who then basically utilized it against the world and created a nuclear catastrophe. This is the idea, is if the United States does not get there first, then we're truly fucked. If the United States gets there first, we could still be fucked, but at least, we would have some time. I don't know. I'm just being optimistic here, but I'm trying to show is that this is kind of not a sum-zero game. This is one of those situations where we have to look at it in the context that it's inevitable. It is going to happen. And so right now, what we're watching unfold in the world is the race towards this. It is the unrestricted warfare, the economic war of attrition. It is the multi-domain battlefield that is being constructed around this simple technological evolution that is coming about of artificial superintelligence, which has three core base foundations: energy, computation, and data. And when you start to look at those three things, you realize that everything that Donald Trump has been doing has been organized around those three components. Why? Because if you can limit energy or accessibility to any things that we call choke points to China or to other competitors in the world that are advancing in artificial intelligence, then you can slow them down while you speed up because you're energy independent. And that's exactly what we've seen over the last 2 years. Computation, NVIDIA and other chips, Taiwan being the center for where 85% of these chipsets are actually made, and China wanting to control Taiwan, and the United States trying to enforce through proxy China's actual taking over of Taiwan through military prowess over in the Middle East or within Venezuela, and controlling the various accessibilities to energies and resources and rare earth minerals and metals. All of this, the whole trade world, tariffs, renegotiation by Trump, this is all strictly about this whole war that we're seeing unfold right before us. So when I start talking about the broader information war, we have to understand is that it's becoming to the point where it's inevitable. And I'm sorry about that, and it sucks. But what we have to do is we have to ensure that the structure of our freedom, our liberty, our God-given rights are retained and protected within what is being built. Because here's the thing, I don't see that actually happening. I don't see Congress giving two shits about preserving the United States Constitution or our civil rights among this evolution of technology that is coming about. And you say, well, it's already there. Well, no, it's so the idea is that flock cameras can go out there and they can spy on you because you're in the public, and anything in the public, the Supreme Court's already deemed that you can film and record. But it's doing more than filming and recording. It's taking in an enormous amount of metadata. It's recording your license plate. It's recording your geolocation, your eye data. That data is then protected under the Fourth Amendment. So now they have a problem. And this is where this whole argument comes about, is what data are they allowed to actually capture within the public domain. And so Congress has to ensure that within this digital infrastructure, within the surveillance state that is being created, that we have the assurances that our rights are protected, our liberties are protected. Man, not the rant I wanted to go on today. All right, now getting to the broader information war. So everybody's been watching Bongino and Flynn and all of this stuff. And, you know, whether Bongino knows it or not, I don't think he even realized how he worded his question. He worded it in a certain way. But Bongino's question this weekend towards Flynn was quite interesting because it wasn't asking if Flynn overtly or covertly took money from foreign influence. Oh, actually, it was asking if he covertly took money. This is what he meant by magically took money for foreign influence to change his political perspective. And Flynn replied back, no. And people started responding with FARA allegations and stuff like this. And I wrote this very long post. I'm not going to read the whole post to you. But what I want people to do, and this goes into that context of ask questions and so forth, is people are failing to understand what is being said. You know, basic reading comprehension in grade school, you can go out there and understand the context of Bongino's question. And whether Bongino realizes that or not, I don't care. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Bongino. Everybody knows this. But when we get down into the nitty gritty, when we're talking about FARA, let's look at this real quick. Flynn does legitimate consulting for foreign clients, registers under FARA, and publicly discloses that relation. Apparently, that alone is supposed to prove he's part of some sinister foreign influence campaign. That's just not true. That's nonsense. People need to understand what they're actually talking about. FARA is not some crazy boogeyman. It's a disclosure law. If you're acting in certain capacities on behalf of a foreign principal, political consulting, PR, representation before U.S. officials, etc., FARA can require you to register and disclose that relationship, activities, and compensation. Registration doesn't mean traitor, foreign operative, compromise, illegal foreign money. It means the relationship is disclosed to the United States government and the American people, which is precisely what FARA is designed to accomplish. Now, I go on, and this is the part that I want to say. Now, if we're going to have a serious conversation about foreign money and political influence, by all means, Hunter Biden, Anthony Fauci, Joe Biden, Hillary and Bill Clinton, AIPAC. I said, shit, I'll even throw people a bone. Jared Kushner, Steve Wyckoff, Howard Lutnick. And I said, maybe follow the rabbit hole to Sheikh Kalnoun and tell me what you find. The reason I put that out there is because people are attacking other people within this movement, different movements, not for the reasons that you think. I want you to understand that. It's even the antithesis of what you think and believe, or at least that's my opinion. But when I look at the Trump administration, I see Jared Kushner got some big problems, man. I don't know why this guy is still there other than he's the son-in-law of Donald Trump. I think that, shit, he should be investigated. Steve Witkoff, same damn thing. Howard Lutnick, oh, yeah. People are like, well, how is Howard Lutnick compromised? Well, the United States is trying to do deals with Tether. Tether is partially owned by Howard Lutnick's company. That's a problem. That's a huge conflict of interest. So, I mean, like I said, I love people. I love the Trump administration. I love Trump. I love a lot of people in the Trump administration, but there's some bad actors in there, and that we need to call that out. And I absolutely will. You know that. But when we're talking about General Flynn, you know, there was this point in time, I think it was last year. And I mentioned this in a broader post that I kind of responded because some people were calling me some mean names, and I like responding to these people. But last year, people in the anti-Flynn crowd were like, oh, check out Mike Gill and check out MG Show and all this stuff. And I started responding to these people. I reached out to Mike Gill. I'm like, hey, send me the information. He sends me this link with thousands upon thousands of documents. I said, okay, which ones pertain to General Flynn? Which ones pertain to Mike Flynn? Which ones are specific to damning pieces of evidence? He goes, well, read them all. And I'm like, I'm not going to fucking read them all. I said, how about you send me your damning critical evidence that you have that you've already talked about that is public instead of pointing me towards this big database of thousands upon thousands of documents. He blocked me. Then I went to the other guys and they were posting all this stuff. And I said, that's actually not what happened. And I go out there and I say, this is what happened. And this is factual evidence that's actually shown within all different types of media, within court records, within the official narrative of what happened. And they come back and what do? They block me. That's not debate. So, like, when people come at me now, I'm just like, I want to talk with you about it. I don't want to talk about it because you're going to block me. No dialogue, no questioning the information I posted, just block me. That's what they do. And so when people block me, that tells me a lot more about the strength of their argument than screaming, this person's a traitor ever will. And it happens a lot to me because people know that I'm going to go out there and I'm going to dig and I'm going to research this stuff and I'm probably going to counter what they're trying to push as bullshit. I'm not saying, listen, I have no association with General Flynn other than having him on the show a few different times. I never sold his book as an affiliate or did any of that stuff. I'm not part of the Flynn Group Network's text or never took a set. Nothing. Right? So, but people come at me like, oh my God, you're one of those Flynn Network people. No, I'm not. I'm just a person who critically fucking thinks and analyzes things just as well with everybody else. I lived through all of that. I watched it happen. I was reporting on it day in and day out. And just because you have a different perspective doesn't mean you're right. Just means you have a different perspective. And what we do is we debate that in a public forum. And people don't want to debate that. They want to block you. I don't like that. So, you know, I had this long post I was going to read about this. Maybe I'll do a shorter video with this post because I couldn't post it to X. It was too damn long. But, you know, these people, I think that there's aspects of influence campaigns going on. I don't know if some of them are paid opposition like Massey and all these guys or Alex Jones. I don't know. And I haven't looked into it enough to figure it out. I know Alpha has his own perspective on it, but I'm not going to make those judgment calls just because, you know what? Sometimes there's some good information they put out. There's some things that they will say that I'm going to go out there, I'm going to look into. I'm like, holy shit, that was right. So, I mean, I look at information as very, very neutral. I don't care where the information is kind of coming from. I look at it in the context of the validity of the information, the factualness of the information. Like this weekend, we saw this post come out. that Hakeem Jeffries and Jared Kushner met in New York City to discuss how Democrats and Trump could cooperate if the Democrats took back the House in November. And I said, what the fuck? I said, fire Jared Kushner for this, and whoever advised Trump that this was a good idea, like, needs to be fired. And why do I say that? There is no common ground with these people. There is no place that we're going to come to a table and agree on things. The Democrats, if they potentially win one of the houses, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they do, it is going to be an absolute shitstorm of how they are going to weaponize their power against President Trump and try to stop and reverse everything that he has done and is doing. There is no common ground. Now, unless there's like a whole bunch of compromise that Jared Kushner opened up in a folder and started showing Hakeem Jeffries and says, you're going to play ball or we're going to have some problems, then I get it. But I don't think that that's what this was about. And the fact that it was publicly released is kind of interesting. So, going into that, I still believe 100% that we're going to have an election in November and that we're going to have the Republicans win both houses. I truly do. If something else happens, you've already heard my piece on that. You already know what I think about that. You already know what I think potentially could come out of that. And this is exactly what the deep state, this is exactly what the globalists want. They want a civil war. And things potentially are even being prepared for that type of scenario. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But today, the Supreme Court of the United States of America had a good judgment that came out. So the Supreme Court lifted a lower court's injunction blocking key portions of Trump's election executive order while the case continues. So the case isn't finalized yet, but there's still other provisions that they're looking into. But these ones they have cleared. This clears the way for federal state citizenship verification lists. Huge, which means that the federal government can go in there and verify citizenship on the state voter rolls. That's huge. United States Postal Service tracking the barcodes for election mail. This is what we've been talking about. Unique identifiers for absentee ballot envelopes, greater verification of who receives mail ballots, and stronger election record tracking and preservation. All of these are freaking huge wins, which completely change the landscape of the midterms elections, especially in states that are predominantly mail-in voting. Colorado, California, these types of states. This doesn't do anything to the machines. The machines is a completely different story, but I think that Trump might have something up his sleeve for that. And I think that maybe even the Jared Kushner thing going out there and talking to, Hakeem Jeffries was maybe art of war, a pure weak when really strong type of indication that maybe they're trying to bait the Democrats to think that, hey, the Republicans are scared that we're actually going to beat them. Oh man, if we could just take 0.5% of the vote over these various different precincts through mail-in ballots or through the voting election machines, then we could win. And maybe what he was doing was baiting them. I don't know. I'm open to all different scenarios, but we'll find out in November, won't we? So many of the other injunctions remain in play, but the Supreme Court absolutely, I think, will have judgments on those by September timeframe. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, came out and he goes, not so fast. Today's SCOTUS decision does not deal with the substance of Trump's unconstitutional executive order and does not mean his illegal attempts to restrict mail-in voting will go forward. He does not run elections in Pennsylvania. He goes, and we will see Trump in court. And so this is why we said the Save America Act would have never been implemented, even if it was passed, because you have governors and attorney generals and you have weaponized liberals that are all going to take to the courts and they're going to sue the shit and hold this up in the courts. The good thing about Josh Shapiro, an attorney general in Pennsylvania, taking this to the Supreme Court or filing injunctions on this executive order is that the ones that have already been ruled on by the Supreme Court is already going to get shot down. So we don't have to worry about that, which is great. So Josh Shapiro just knows that he'll never win another election if Trump's integrity executive order becomes law. And that is the freaking truth. So Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna just confirmed a grand jury is investigating Neville Roy Singham, the CCP-linked Marxist millionaire bankrolling Democrat socialist candidates. Neville Roy Singham, who is the tycoon that is currently living in China, that's been funneling over $780 million in the various different political organizations, grassroots organizations. Singham is a devout and proclaimed Marxist and socialist. That's interesting. By the way, who told you that Neville Roy Singham was under grand jury investigation months ago? Yeah. Just saying. And now it's being officially announced through Anna Paulina Luna. We've been telling you. Because he's not the only NGO under investigation. Now, I'm not a fan of Laura Loomer. You know this. Actually, quite the opposite. But Laura Loomer has made some explosive allegations about what she claims is happening inside mosques across America. Loomer stated that mosques are being used to stockpile military-grade rifles, grenades, knives, and explosives to arm military-aged Muslim men and illegal immigrants. She described it as coordinated warfare operation aimed at subjugating Americans under Sharia law and urged people to arm themselves in preparation for what she called Islamic Jihad. I think she's right on this one. I'm not going to lie. I think she's right on this one. More things to consider in the context of this. 60,000 pounds of potassium nitrate mysteriously disappeared from a train from Utah to California. Thousands of police uniforms in various different states stolen. Cartel gun running operations. I'll get into that here in a second. Flooding the border with terrorists. So you remember, flooded the border with 23 million terrorists. You remember, I've yelled and screamed about this multiple different times. The thing that nobody talks about with the 23 million people that came over that southern border, the one thing that nobody ever talks about is they came up to the Darien Gap in Panama and then went up to the United States border. And we talked about the NGOs and the globalist organizations, the UN that was all there. But how the fuck did the Chinese, Middle Eastern, and Northern African people get across the ocean to Venezuela? Who paid for it? That's the question that needs to be asked. That's the question nobody's asking because nobody wants to deal with the answer. And the answer is China, because the answer brings about a direct declaration of war. So nobody's going to mention that. But see, there's other things that happen. If you remember the George Floyd stuff that happened, remember George Floyd? You know, one of the reasons Derek Chauvin was called in is because he had a relationship with with Floyd. And they worked at the same nightclub, which was owned by a person, I can't mention their name, who also owned a radio station, which the radio station was the third building that actually burned down. The nightclub was under federal investigation for money laundering operations. And it has direct connections to La Raza, the race, which is kind of I guess, a socialist nationalist group out of Mexico. But there's further implications that one of the things that they were doing in the context of the money laundering was running guns. You remember Vegas and all the guns in the hotel room? I remember that was a gun running operation. And there was the same one was happening in Minneapolis. And this was covered up. And where were those guns running to? How were they coming up from the southern border in the Minneapolis? And who were they getting distributed to? Well, they were getting distributed to, from what I've learned being here, to what Laura Loomer just said. No joke. I don't know if it's true, but guess what? I'm going to prepare as if it is, because shit, if we are preparing for scorched earth, and this is what it's all about, this is firestorm event, scorched earth. Remember what I was telling about earlier? If the Democrats somehow win one of the houses in November, that leads to civil war. That civil war isn't Americans against Americans. It is the rising up of 23 million, give or few, extremists who are already in our country, who are heavily fortified and heavily armed. And I've laid out the scenario over and over and over of how they will do this. And they will start city by city. They will start electric grid through telecommunication grids. They'll take over police armories and National Guard armories. And they'll take over all of the command and control centers distributed within a state infrastructure. And trust me, they are already doing the reconnaissance and intelligence operations to validate that information. So is that a bad thing? Yeah, that's a fucking horrible thing. And we need more boots on the ground and more motivation by this administration to curb that type of stuff. At least that's my opinion. Now, is there a plan? I don't know. Maybe, possibly, potentially. Tom Homan seems to understand exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Foreign governments should not be able to secretly bankroll influencers to push propaganda on Americans. So, Representative Anna Paulina Luna says today she introduced a bipartisan Foreign Propaganda Disclosure Act to bring social media influencers under FARA and expose who is paying them. I like this. I like this. Except there's a problem, Representative Luna. There's a big problem with the bill you're proposing. Please ensure that that bill captures proxy and indirect financial support, not simply checks written directly from foreign governments to influencers. Foreign influence can easily be routed through layers of private companies, contractors, and intermediaries. Very hypothetical example here. Foreign government, contract Chevron, PR consulting firm, LL Media Incorporated. Let's look at this. A foreign government contracts Chevron. The contract contains a PR communication budget. Chevron hires LL Media Inc., if you can understand who those initials are, for consulting services. LL Media Inc. gets paid domestically, so technically no foreign government ever wrote the influencer a check. The owner then uses her separate social media platform to construct narratives that consistently advance the interests of the original foreign government. Again, completely hypothetical, but that's exactly the potential loophole legislation needs to address. Follow the money to its original source and disclose the entire financial chain. Otherwise, we're exposing direct foreign influence while leaving a giant door open for laundered influence through proxies and intermediaries. Now, this is the crazy thing. That was just a hypothetical example that I gave. What if I said that there was actually a legitimate example of this that was already investigated by the FEC, but they did nothing? So I said, we've been talking about how foreign influence can move through private companies rather than directly to politicians. This was Israeli government buys advertising through iHeartMedia. That iHeartMedia pays his podcast revenue to the pro Ted Cruz super PAC. This demonstrates exactly why simply asking, did a foreign government donate to a politician, misses the bigger picture. That's what we're talking about here, because this actually happened. The Israeli government bought advertising through iHeartMedia. iHeartMedia then directed that podcast revenue directly to Ted Cruz's podcast, which is owned by Ted Cruz's super PAC. That is exactly what we're talking about. So another level of this, and I posted this in response to something General Flynn was saying the other day, but I'm going to bring this up real quick because I've talked about this one a few different ways, a few different times. I said, very hypothetical here, and because the company was tagged in it, China could theoretically fund a few thousand anonymous, pseudo-anonymous poly-market accounts, coordinate bets favoring Democrats in U.S. election, and artificially move the prediction market odds. Poly-market then reposts those odds across social media as legitimate market signal, which people then perceive as a poll. That signal gets picked up by influencers, media, algorithms, and eventually voters, potentially influencing how Americans perceive the momentum, popularity, and inevitability of a candidate. Think about the information war layers involved, coordinated and authentic behavior, astroturfing, market signal and manipulation, disinformation laundering, perception management, social proof, bandwagon effect, algorithmic amplification, information cognitive warfare, foreign capital. Once the feedback loop begins, artificial activity can potentially generate real organic activity. Election interference doesn't necessarily require changing votes. In the modern information environment of unrestricted warfare, influencing how voters perceive reality before they vote is one of the primary objectives. So this is interesting. I say the second image here is paid sponsorship, which is being portrayed as a poll. This is unusual whales. This is a paid partnership, as you see down here. It says, which party wins the 2028 U.S. presidential election? And it's portrayed as a poll to people. And then he reports there's a 61% the Democrat Party to win the U.S. 2028 presidential election, an all-time high per Polymarket. He's reporting it as a poll. That's election influence. That you can't, that's fucking borderline illegal. What if all of that 61% on the Democrat side was funded by China? Now that is election interference. But since it's quasi-anonymous, you don't know. This is what we're talking about with influence operations and how they operate. And I hope people see that. So we saw this one today. And Amos actually replied to me, which is pretty cool. I don't know Amos. I don't coordinate with him. But he actually replied to me, and I responded back. He goes, the IRGC's decision to put $10 million bounty on Barron Trump's head, along with publishing every detail about his location and security details, seems like a very bad idea. Yeah, it's interesting because Iran doesn't have the technology to actually track all the information that they're saying they can of Barron Trump. They just don't have those capabilities. I said, in a world of constructed narratives, the Mossad is active again, trying to instigate a prolonged war so they can obtain their objectives on controlling Iranian oil. And then Amuse actually responded. He said, is Mossad placing stories on IRGC media? I knew they were plugged in, but that's wild. And I said, well, how is that wild? In 2019 through 2020, the Chinese paid the United States mainstream media to run smear campaigns and propaganda campaigns to influence the 2020 election against Donald Trump. The deep state has consistently ran influence operations within the mainstream media against whomever their enemy is. That includes the creation of false information and propaganda to substantiate their claims. Do we think that just because this is Iran and Israel, that doesn't happen? That's some truth. How about this? Factions within the IRGC and Iranian political establishment that have been penetrated, compromised, or are cooperating with Israeli intelligence networks. My statement was more generalized. Iran has spent decades building proxy networks across the Middle East. Israel has spent decades building intelligence networks inside Iran. That penetration appears to run far deeper than simply having a few informants. When senior officials, nuclear scientists, commanders, facilities, and movements can be targeted with extraordinary precision, you're looking at a serious counterintelligence problem somewhere inside the Iranian system. That doesn't mean the Mossad controls the IRGC. It means Iran's security apparatus has clearly been penetrated at multiple levels, and competing factions create opportunities for exactly that kind of intelligent exploitation. When you have Iranian political figures calling for an end of the war while other factions amplify rhetoric almost guaranteed to provoke further escalation, you would have to ask who benefits. It certainly isn't the Iranian people or the government already being crushed economically by the war of attrition. It benefits whoever wants the prolonged war. That doesn't prove Mossad planted it, but given Israel's demonstrated intelligence penetration inside Iran, it's a possibility worth considering. Now, that's interesting, right? Because then today, like right after this comes out, sure enough, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Netanyahu, says Iran tried to kill one of his sons. So there's your amplification network directly coming from Netanyahu. I mean, let's think. Does going out there and threatening Barron Trump by Iran benefit Iran in any way? When their president, their speakers, all of their foreign ministers, much of the IRGC, the Ayatollah and the Ayatollah's grandson are all coming out saying, just capitulate, it's over. Who does it benefit? Benefits this guy. So, Scott Bessent today, the war of economic attrition, just gave the ultimatum to any and all countries who engage economically with Iran. You will be removed from the dollar system. This is so huge. So, Russia, China, who else have we got here? Pakistan, Turkey. There's a lot of them. British intelligence. Yeah, there's a lot of them. And so this is a threat more to the globalist system than it is to anything else. We know that there's proxy mechanisms of funding that are flowing through into Iran. And Scott Bessent basically just said, is we're going to hunt them down and we're going to remove you from the dollar system. Imagine if the parts of the European Union were removed from the dollar system. Oh my God, that'd be uproar. But there's a problem with the dollar. The dollar is being systematically devalued, isn't it? We had an article come out today. Americans' wages have fallen to 43% of the national income, to the lowest since the Great Depression. For every $1 in the U.S. economy produces, workers are getting less of that than in 1929. But see, when Scott Bessent comes out there and he threatens China, Russia, the UK, Australia, various Five Eyes, European Union, various different African nations. When he threatens them, basically, if you are financially or economically helping Iran, we are coming after you. Not only that, we're coming after your proxy networks. Not only that, is we're going to ensure that Iran has to capitulate through the war of economic attrition. That's basically what he's saying. And he's going to, and if we have to come after you, we will. I posted this the other day. I said the war of economic attrition. I've been posting it every day on my X account if people didn't realize this. I've been posting it every day, the war of economic attrition. Then the other day I said the war of economic attrition, not just for Iran, but everybody else who's associated with financing them. I said that for a reason. So, what happens when the United States begins to sanction Western countries or restricts their access to dollar transactions? Well, then maybe a whole bunch of other countries start losing the US dollar, and there's a potential collapse or crash. Maybe a parallel system is already being built up. So I posted on this the other day with national debt, and something that Scott Bessent said as well, is that we're going to have to grow our way out of the national debt. And this is actually the right level of thinking. When we start talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars of new markets emerging through the technological innovation and changes that are occurring right now, we have to start looking at our currency as well. And this is one of the things I think the Trump administration will announce probably after the midterms. But this is what Scott Bessent is actually talking about, because he kind of wants... not that they want the weakened dollar, but they want less of our foreign adversaries or even foreign allies that we consider adversaries out of the dollar for a reason. Maybe the conversation isn't as simple as wages, what we're talking about there with the dollar's value. Maybe it's time to reevaluate what collateralizes the dollar itself. We are entering an economy where enormous amounts of productive value will come from AI, automation, energy infrastructure, data centers, digital assets, and tokenized real-world assets, not simply human labor. Yet our monetary system is still largely anchored to government credit and debt. What happens if we begin collateralizing currency against the productive asset base of the United States? Energy, infrastructure, commodities, strategic resources, treasuries, digital assets, tokenized American assets, not a return to the gold standard, an American productive asset standard. If we're rebuilding the economic architecture anyway, maybe we should rethink the foundation of the money sitting on top of it. And that is exactly the key part that people have to understand. When we start talking about all of this, there is going to be a point where the revaluation of the collateralization of what money actually is in our country. This is why Elon said in 5 years, you will look at money completely differently than you look at it today. Today, it is a credit and debt system based upon the collateralized labor of the American people, the good faith of the American people, and then enforced by the U.S. military. But what happens when that money of the United States dollar, is now backed by a sovereign wealth fund that holds energy, infrastructure, commodities, strategic resources, treasuries, digital assets, tokenized American assets, stocks, bonds, ownership of companies, patent rights, all technologies? It strengthens the value, especially when those are appreciating assets. And that's where we're heading. And that's why I think Scott Bessent is making these moves, because he's delinking and decoupling these various different countries of influence from the dollar intentionally. At least that's my thought that he'd be doing here. And SpaceX has partnered with NVIDIA to launch space-optimized data centers. Does anybody remember a 2022 article I wrote on my Substack about how Elon Musk is building the next Sirius XM and how he is going to not only put Starlink in the sky for internet, but he's going to build a intranet within space that's going to have its own data cloud and its own data centers in space? I don't know. Maybe I should be a futurist. I don't know. But I would tell you that SpaceX is incredibly underpriced. Same thing with NVIDIA. Just go with that if you like to go out and buy some stocks. Not financial advice. Just saying it's incredibly underpriced. It's incredibly underpriced. All right, I got to do this real quick. We're going to go ahead and play this one real quick. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. We hear a lot about crypto, but here's the part most people miss. Crypto was created so you could actually own and control your money. After the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was designed as an alternative to banks. So instead of banks holding your money, delaying transfers, or limiting access, you are in control. And if you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, you felt that problem. Now, fast forward today, everyone's heard of crypto, but getting started still feels complicated. That's exactly why I use Rumble Wallet. It takes all the complexity and makes it simple. Choose what you want, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, dollar-backed stablecoins, or even digital gold backed by real gold. No complicated setup. It connects with MoonPay, so you can use your credit card, debit card, or bank and be up and running in minutes. Once you are set up, you can even support your favorite Rumble creators like me directly. So do this now. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and download the Rumble wallet. From there, you can set up your wallet, tap buy, and you are in the game. In just a few minutes, you can go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. Absolutely. And let me throw something out there. So I'm building my new studio. I got a lot of things that I'm moving around. I'm doing all these things. I got this 18-foot by 8-foot Morgan box that I'm putting in my backyard. Had some trouble getting into the backyard this weekend. We got a solution for that, but I'm framing it all out. I'm building a studio in there. I got to run electrical. Got to do all these things. So I got to spend a lot of money, a lot of my money to do this. So sometimes I'm going to the hardware store and I'm spending $1,200, or same day I might do $1,000 here at Menards. I might go to Home Depot. I might spend another $1,000 because it's going to cost me like $4,000 to do this whole project. But I'm buying everything all at once. I go in there the other day with I have a local bank, local bank that I use. I go in there, plenty of money in my account, scan, swipe my card, denied. Declined. What the fuck? Look, there's money in my account. Like, the hell's going on? And so I'm like, try that again. Maybe I put in the wrong PIN or something. Whoop. So I call up the bank. And they're like, oh, well, we limit the amount of money you can spend on your debit card every day. And I'm like, excuse me? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what's my limit? They go, oh, you have $1,000 limit. And then you have like a $600 withdrawal limit. And I said, okay, listen, I'm at the store right now. I want you to go in and increase my limit to $2,500 and increase my withdrawal limit on my debit card to up to $1,500. And she goes, okay, give me a few minutes. And she comes back. She goes, I got to go ask the manager, but I'm going to go get the permission. I'll be right back. And you should be okay within a few minutes. She comes back. And she goes, Mr. Reed, I'm happy to inform you, I was able to increase that limit to the $2,500. I'm like, great. She goes, but unfortunately, the bank manager said he saw no reason whatsoever to increase your ATM debit card limit. I said, excuse me? She goes, what? And I go, your manager saw no reason? She goes, yeah. And I go, is he still in the office? She goes, no, he actually just left for the day. I'm like, is he going to be there tomorrow? She goes, yeah. I'm like, let me tell you something. I don't give a shit who he thinks he is, but you don't tell me what I can and cannot do with my own money. And she kind of like got really soft and quiet. She goes, and I'm like, yeah. So tomorrow, I will be going down to that bank and I'm pulling all of my money out of that bank and I'm going to go to another bank. But here's the problem with cryptocurrency. Like if I had all of that money onto a crypto wallet to which I had direct accessibility to use stable coins of that money instead through touch to scan or a card, no banks in that. There's no banks involved there's no management infrastructure that puts those restrictions on me. You become the bank. You become the choice and decision maker. Remember that. All right, guys, I'm going to be on Baseless Conspiracies later tonight.